In 2015, the British government quietly marked the end of a debt that had lasted 182 years. Taxpayers had finally finished paying off a loan taken out to compensate slave owners, not the enslaved, when slavery was abolished. That loan amounted to 40% of Britain's entire annual budget in 1833. For generations, ordinary people, including descendants of the enslaved, unknowingly paid for this moral inversion. What began as financial paperwork would shape a nation's fortune, and it would shape its reckoning with the true cost of abolition. In August 1833, Parliament passed the Slavery Abolition Act, but the law's fine print spelled out a staggering financial deal. The British state committed £20 million to compensate slave owners for the loss of their so-called property. This was not a token gesture. £20 million represented about 40% of the entire government budget for that year, a sum so vast it dwarfed almost every public project or expense in British history up to that point. The equivalent today would be tens of billions of pounds, a figure that rivals the cost of national emergencies and financial crises. Parliamentary records show the compensation clause was not a footnote, it was central. The Act specified that those entitled to the services of enslaved people would be paid, and the government would raise the money by loan or the creation of new capital. Over 800,000 men, women, and children were legally freed, but not a single penny of this enormous payout went to them. Instead, the entire sum flowed to the owners, an unprecedented transfer of public wealth to private hands. The state's promise was explicit. The loss being recognized was not human suffering, but the loss of property rights in other people. The scale of this compensation and the choice of who received it would have consequences for generations. Legal freedom did not mean release from control. Under the Slavery Abolition Act, nearly every man, woman, and child formerly enslaved was reclassified as an apprentice. Instead of immediate liberty, they were compelled to keep working for their former owners, without wages, for up to 6 more years. For field workers, the apprenticeship term was set to run until 1840. For domestic workers, the term ran until 1838. The official justification was preparing people for freedom, but the reality was a system designed to secure a steady labor force for plantations. Apprentices were required to work more than 40 hours a week, with only minimal provisions in return. Leaving the estate without permission was forbidden. Refusing to work or even minor acts of insubordination could result in flogging, imprisonment, or time on the treadmill. Colonial magistrates enforced these rules with harsh discipline, and records from Jamaica and Barbados document hundreds of cases where apprentices faced severe punishment for resisting unpaid labor. Across the Caribbean, this system was met with strikes, petitions, and ongoing acts of defiance. In Antigua, mass protests erupted on the very day apprenticeship began. By 1838, the pressure from both the Caribbean and abolitionists in Britain forced Parliament to abandon the scheme 2 years early. The so-called transition to freedom became another chapter of coerced labor, ensuring that while slave owners received their cash compensation, the people whose lives had been stolen were made to keep working for nothing. Compensation flowed through every corner of Britain's elite. The Slave Compensation Commission processed more than 46,000 claims, each one carefully logged in official registers. These claims came from the wealthiest families, the landed gentry, and investors who held shares in Caribbean plantations. But the money did not stop with individuals. The Church of England appears in the records as a beneficiary, with bishops, missionary societies, and cathedral chapters all receiving payouts for enslaved people they owned or managed. Oxford and Cambridge colleges are listed among the recipients, their endowments strengthened by compensation awards linked to estates in the Caribbean. Major banks and insurance companies in the City of London handled, invested, or directly benefited from these funds, sometimes as mortgagees, sometimes as assignees of annuities. Members of Parliament, military officers, and professionals also filed claims, as did widows and trustees managing inherited estates. The compensation system reached deep into the heart of Britain's economic, religious, and educational institutions. Every award, Whether a few pounds or tens of thousands was a line in the ledger, public money transferred to those who had profited most from slavery. The official registers do not hide this reach. They document it, claim by claim, institution by institution. A single line in the compensation ledger can still echo through British history. In one entry, an Oxford college is listed as the recipient of a four-figure award, money transferred directly from the state to the college treasury, calculated as payment for dozens of enslaved people on a Caribbean estate. The claim details the number of people, the precise sum, and the date the award was authorized. This was not a hidden transaction. The college name appears in the same ink and hand as the largest landowners and merchants of the day, its role as beneficiary made plain in the official register. Elsewhere in the records, a City of London finance house appears not as a plantation owner, but as the assignee of an annuity. Here, the compensation was not paid out in cash, but converted into a government-backed income stream. The finance house, acting on behalf of a client or as a creditor, received annual payments secured by the state, underwritten by the same apparatus that managed Britain's public debt. The ledger specifies the claim type, the sum awarded, and the annuity's terms, an arrangement that would persist for decades, compounding the original profit. Each of these entries ties the legacy of slavery to the foundations of British education and finance, their details preserved in the ledgers now digitized for public scrutiny. Raising £20 million in the 1830s required financial engineering on a national scale. The government could not simply write a check. The sum was far beyond what the Treasury held in ready cash. Instead, officials turned to the City of London's most powerful financiers. In August 1835, the Treasury finalized a contract with a syndicate led by Nathan Mayer Rothschild and Moses Montefiore to underwrite a government loan of £15 million. This was not a short-term note, but a perpetual debt, issued as 3% government stock, with interest paid out year after year. Investors subscribed to the new securities, confident in the state's promise to pay. The remaining £5 million of the compensation package was not paid out in cash at all. Instead, it was issued directly as government annuities, long-term interest-bearing securities known as reduced annuities, carrying a 3.5% annual return. Some claimants took their compensation as these annuities, collecting regular payments from the state for decades. The arrangement transformed a one-time obligation into a permanent fixture in Britain's public finances. Market intermediaries, banks, brokers, and insurance offices handled the subscriptions, transfers, and annuity assignments, embedding the cost of emancipation deep within the machinery of national debt. What began as a payout to slave owners became a financial commitment that would outlast the world that created it. For nearly 2 centuries, the cost of compensating slave owners sat quietly within Britain's national accounts. That quietly hidden burden shaped public finances for generations. The original £15 million loan, arranged in 1835, did not vanish with a single payment. Instead, it was absorbed into the machinery of public debt, reshaped and refinanced through generations. Successive governments rolled the obligation into new bonds and consolidated loans, each carrying forward the interest owed for the emancipation settlement. The loan was carried forward, year after year. The debt was not an abstract relic. Every year, taxpayers, factory workers in Manchester, miners in Wales, teachers in London, immigrants from the Caribbean, contributed to the interest on money borrowed to indemnify slave owners. By the late 20th century, the connection between this debt and its origins had faded from public memory, but the payments continued. Taxpayers kept contributing. In February 2015, the Treasury quietly redeemed the last undated government bonds linked to the original compensation loan. Only then did the formal financial obligation end. British citizens, including descendants of the enslaved, had spent 182 years helping to pay off a loan taken out to reimburse those who once claimed ownership over human lives. The final payment closed the account, but the history remained, written into ledgers, budgets, and the pockets of the powerful. Generations paid for the freedom others claimed to grant. The institutions enriched by slavery remain pillars of British life. Today, the legacies of compensation still shape economic power and inequality. Reckoning with this history means seeing its consequences not as distant, but as part of the world we live in now.